I prepared that in the morning. Don't be sure.
Sheila, can we have a roll call, please?
Troy Carr,
Here.
Jamie Clapham. Here. Christine Stephenson.
Here.
Donna Moore.
Here.
Michael Berkland is absent with notice. Walt Swan
Here.
and Katie Urban. Here.
All right, I'd like to ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. I have no open forum requests, so then there's no board response. This time we'll have the report from my acting superintendent, Dr. Strasser.
Good evening, board. Well, we've made it through the school year. We've finished with a great week, concluding the year and capping it off with graduation. So as we transition to the summer, a couple things to keep you aware of. First of all, with the changes at the federal level, we're losing our school-wide mental health grant, and we get partial funds, but they need to be closed out by the end of December. So we'll be wrapping up that. Director Strong's got some things in place to utilize what we can of that grant, and then close that out accordingly. On the positive note, some of the other grants that we've received that are through the Department of Justice, such as our COPS grant, we do get to, that's still in place. So that hasn't changed. It's just the grants from the Department of Education that are currently changing. This is a week where we get into organizational excellence. So we have our representatives from Studer Education, Casey and Tina will be here Wednesday and Thursday. They'll be working with DDL and our principals. Last week, our principals and building leaders across the district met with Mike Maffoni, and the work that they're doing there is increasing knowledge and application of the role around developing PLCs and monitoring our PLCs. So a lot of great work there. We had our data retreats last Thursday. We had behavior RTI training on Friday. So we have had a lot of things going last week for our staff that they were involved in that help set the stage for both closing and transition us into next school year already. Speaking of learning, we start our first NISL, which is a National Institute of School Leadership cohort that starts on Monday. So we'll get that going. We've got 20 district leaders involved in that. So we're excited to get moving there. And the last thing I want to leave you with is just a little bit, excuse me, of our substitute teacher information. So this year we had 14 subs who at the end of the year had 15 years of continual service as a sub in our district. That next layer, the 10 to 14 years, we had 15. And then the next lower layer of 5 to 9 years, we had 26 subs. So about 55 subs with significant continual service in our district. In addition, we had at least, so I gotta get my numbers right, 54 subs who worked 100+ days this year. Again, another significant number. And then I find this amazing and a huge show of dedication on behalf of our substitutes. We had 50 subs who are in their 70s or 80s subbing in our district. So you think of the experience and the dedication that it takes to sub in our district. We've got an amazing number of people who step up and help out our district and ultimately serve our kids. So very excited for that. And with that, that concludes my report. I'll respond to any questions you have.
Mrs. Urban?
Do we have any positions tied to that mental health grant that we're losing?
So there were, we were able to open up some school counseling positions, but the positions that were filled are able to be moved into current open non-grant counseling positions. So we're able to just maneuver within, and we weren't able to fill all the positions that we have across the district. So there was no impact there. Yeah, don't recall off the top of my head, but I know it was the counselors that in my conversation with Director Strong that we were able to maneuver.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Stephenson?
This is not about your report, but it's about the consent agenda, and I thought I'd ask it now. Just noticing on the employment recommendations, it seems like there's a lot of, or in change of status, that people are moving around. Do you feel like our change in special ed salaries, have we filled some positions that needed filled because of that? I guess mostly I'm wondering about what's the status of our special ed department.
We have made some progress on our special ed department. I will say we still have a significant need. So I have some numbers in mind where we need to be. We are, like I said, we've made some progress, but yet we're still in need of probably 15 or so direct special education teachers in our district. So it's down a little bit, but that's where we're at.
Maybe this question for Bobby, but I'll ask it through you. Have we put out press releases? Have we tried to get the word out on Facebook posts? I haven't seen anything.
So,
But
yeah, on June 4th, so in 2 days, actually, we are going to launch a marketing campaign with Home Slice again for special education specifically that Kira had reserved some funds for. So that will hopefully help.
oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yep.
Because yeah, I think if people knew about the salary change, maybe we would have more luck.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, Ms. Clapham?
I was just wondering, so I know we as a board have really appreciated our grant writer. I feel like this is kind of a loaded question, but do we feel like we're going to have to pull back or pause on some of the requests from the grant writer because of kind of uncertainty with grants, or do we feel like it'll just it will just look different and look in different places? I'm just wondering moving forward.
Honestly, those are conversations I haven't had with Director Strong regarding how we approach pursuing different grants. I'm not aware of grants that are on the horizon for us to be in the running for. So that's something that I can definitely follow up with her on. But I don't have any, I guess, comments one way or another on that.
I was curious about how, you know, I know there was a lot of conversation about the makeup days, so I was just wondering how, in your mind, did that go? And
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, we showed some flexibility in terms of leave status, and I know staff took leave as they needed to, and that was a part of this. But I thought we also had great participation, and we had one of the hard parts was Mr. Maffoni was supposed to be here 2 days, and of course, on Tuesday he was arriving early in the morning, and his plane turned around and went back to Denver because it wouldn't land here in Rapid City because of the fog.
yeah,
So we had to adjust on the fly and move things to Wednesday when he was able to get here. And so that caused a little bit of just maneuvering,
Mhm.
but I haven't had anything direct come my way. I guess the principals haven't indicated any concerns. And I think staff were able to do what they needed to.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you for that report. At this time, the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Sassy.
Okay, thank you, President Carr. Share my screen. So tonight, board wanted to spend some time discussing school year 25-26 transportation changes. So as you are all well aware, we engaged in a what we call the function study of the busing and transportation function earlier this year. Worked on that process throughout this year. Spent the last 2.5-ish months working through the data and working with Gage Consulting to come to a point where we had action going into next year that would hopefully start to address the issue. Just a couple thoughts as we were working through that process, and as we were reviewing the outcome and the results of that study. One of the things that stood out to us, and if you recall, the recommendations ranging from minor changes all the way to very, very major changes, such as changing the busing boundaries, looking at staggered bell times. In the thought process going into this first year was really, how do we find the minimum effective dose? What is the least we can do to get the largest result and hopefully start to turn the tide for this issue? So that's really where we were focused over the last couple of months as we looked at this data. Just for a reminder and to keep this front of mind as we have this conversation, these were the key findings that were raised in the busing study. I highlighted a couple because I think they're particularly important to this conversation. So first was that we had many runs with far too many bus stops, resulting in longer ride times. If you recall, in the study report that we received, we were about double the national average in terms of stops per route, which of course results in a much longer ride, in an inefficient ride, and just a greater use of resources. I'm just going to jump down to number 4. Routes are built for the number of eligible students rather than the number of actual riders, resulting in inefficient route sets. So you're going to see here shortly some more data, but essentially what was happening is we were building routes around the total potential ridership in a given area. And obviously not all students are going to ride. And so the actual numbers of students that we had riding buses was much lower, resulting in about a 30% capacity on average for most of our buses. Of course, multiple other contributors here. Number three, school bus driver recruitment and retention has hit critical mass. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But really, those were the two areas as we moved into, again, this initial year in response that we really focused on as we were having the discussions on how do we move forward. So these were really the steps that we worked through as we absorbed that information and as we work back and forth with Gage. First of all, how do we reduce the number and frequency of general education bus stops and try to shorten those route times? From there, then verifying that the current ridership counts provided were accurate. So what we really wanted to do was get a much better picture of, we know how many students are eligible to ride in these areas and for these buses, but how many students are actually riding. So I'll talk you through that process and what that looked like. Three, with those new numbers, then determine the number of buses, the minimum number of buses needed for each school, reducing the number of buses deployed. So again, the idea was trying to shrink that function, and ultimately, how do we use the resources we have in a more effective way? And then number four, for the schools that were identified for reduced fleet deployments, develop new routes, test those routes, ensure that we can pull off those routes. So those are really the steps that we worked through, and we'll talk a little more about each of those steps. So again, step number one, in trying to reduce the number and frequency of general education bus stops, shortening the route times, what the team did was really sit down and do a very comprehensive analysis of every stop on every run for every single school. And ultimately, what this resulted in was the elimination of 108 current bus stops. Now, that may not sound like a ton, given the fleet size and the number of buses we have on the roads. I think what's really important to remember is, on average, those stops are taking about 4.5 to 5 minutes per stop. So you multiply 108 times 4.5 to 5, and it's a significant amount of time that's being spent on those stops, opening the door, closing the door, putting the park brake on, all those things. So really a significant reduction in the number of stops. There's an example that one bus route had 25 stops. Route's going to be reconfigured to reduce it to 17 stops. So again, everything that we could do to better space the pickup and drop off areas, and ultimately pull down those number of stops and the number of time spent not in transit was where we were trying to go. Obviously, we're going to talk more about this as we get towards the end of the presentation, but there's going to be stops that will be further spaced out. But again, the idea was, we want to place these stop locations somewhere safe, and we want the stop locations to be reasonable when you back up and look at them geographically. Do they make sense? Are they safe? And can we look at them and say they're reasonable? And those were really the criteria that we put that analysis up to. I think one of the,
Mr. Chancey?
yes, sir.
I just have a interesting question
Please.
to me.
Yeah.
How are, with the changing of the stops?
Yeah.
Are parents given maps, or how are the new stops identified to the parents?
Great question. Can I answer it in a few slides? Okay. Great question. I will get to it, I promise. I think one of the issues in this is sort of one of those, this is just the way it's always been done situations, is that over the years, the district has frequently added stops. And that's often happened as parents have called and said, hey, I need my stop moved in front of my house, these extenuating circumstances. And I think that can be very difficult at times to talk a parent through why we can't do that. And so oftentimes stops were added to routes, and those grew and grew and grew, and we ended up in the situation we're in. And so another part of this is then, of course, being much more controlled about when and how we add stops and what that process will look like. Please, yes, ma'am.
Based on that, and I
Yeah.
don't like to policy to death.
Oh, please.
But arguably, and when you talk about what our job is in governing, do we actually have a policy that says how the stops are determined? Because it kind of sounds like maybe it was a
Yeah.
little haphazard.
Yep. I think that's a fair assessment. We do not, but as part of this, we're going to bring a policy forward that stipulates some of those those things, because I think it is really important that the folks at the Student Transportation Hub are not always the ones getting beat up about, hey, why won't you add a stop? My kid doesn't want to walk X. And I'm not making light of those concerns. There's really legitimate concerns, but obviously these are the difficult parts of our jobs. The fact is we have a limited number of resources that we're trying to deploy in the most efficient way possible. And so sometimes we're gonna have to say no to those things. And it's important to have policy to be able to fall back on. So great thought. Yeah, please.
Question now.
Yeah, please.
And maybe you'll answer this, but, what's the longest walk to a stop?
Ooh, good question.
And I ask that only because, I mean, we don't want to defeat the purpose of busing if they're still having to drive their kids to the bus stop.
Yeah, I can verify that. I don't have it on me. I don't believe that there is any stop longer than 3 blocks from a house. That was sort of one of the criteria, the loose criteria is when looking at how you space those. And there's a lot of complexity to that. It's difficult. Some neighborhoods, it's much, how would I say this the right way? They are geographically laid out better for really reasonable spacing. Other neighborhoods are very difficult, you know, and we have an interesting community with that. The west side becomes very difficult because of the layout of some of the housing plots. The east side and the way that that's laying out is a little simpler in terms of trying to find reasonably spaced areas, but that was sort of the criteria we stuck to. But I can check on that and let you know, Katie. Yes, ma'am. So current number of stops, 467. We reduced to 359. Obviously, that reduces total travel time for students and buses, which then will allow in a reduction of total buses needed, as we'll talk about in step 3. Okay, then step 2, we moved on to, we need to verify the ridership counts for each bus route and have a really, really solid idea of what we're looking at in terms of actual ridership. We went through a process of collecting those numbers for both morning and afternoon runs over a significant period of time. So essentially either viewing film from the bus camera and or the ridership reports turned in by the bus drivers, and looking at that over basically a 6-month period. So here's the data that comes back. The expected ridership was 1,600 students. So based on, and this is a specific area, I'm sorry. 1,600 students, actual ridership was 1,223 students. So the average riders per bus was 39 students. Keep in mind, the majority of the buses we have on the road are 76 to 81 passenger buses. So we were at less than 50% capacity on average for each of our buses. With our current 34 general ed bus routes, we have 2,400 available seats. Again, most buses are 83 passenger, accommodating 75 to 80 elementary school age and 56 to 65 middle school age students. So in any way you cut it or any way you look at that situation, far under capacity in terms of what our buses can hold and what we had deployed every day. There's just a note there. We have 34 routes built, currently only able to deploy 31 general ed buses daily. Again, that's the reason for the 4 to 5 cancellations throughout the course of the year. So that was a really important step, really digging in and understanding we have to be better about what we can actually expect and not what the maximum amount of students that could ride the bus is, because we need to better understand what that looks like. And again, use our resources more efficiently. So this was a really important step. So then moving on to step 3, determine the minimum number of buses needed at each school. So taking the total ridership numbers at each school, dividing that by 70% of seats on a bus. So we targeted the idea that, hey, we think we can comfortably fill buses to a 70% capacity. Number one, that again is still well under the capacity of the bus, whether you're looking at elementary or middle school age. And number two, it gives some buffer around these new routes so that if we have an upswing in number of riders, we're not left in a situation where we go, oh shoot, now we need three more routes and three more drivers. So 70% felt like a comfortable number. That came directly from our professional consulting firm. Gives us a safe, comfortable, and efficient number of fleet resources required per school. So total current routes, 34 gen ed routes. Number of drivers available daily were 31-ish, right in that area. That was average, obviously. Proposed reduction in routes for 25, 26 after reconfiguring these things would be about 8 routes. So we'd move from 34 routes down to 26 as we moved into next year. So about an 8 route reduction. We then move into step 4 for the schools. Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
Please.
oh, I had a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So from the previous slide, obviously, if you needed 31 buses before with 4 routes being canceled and now you're at 26 bus routes.
Yep.
Does that then solve? Knock on wood?
Yes. No, asterisk. Yes, it does. Yeah. So we'll get there too.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Here in about 2 slides. Yes, sir. Any other questions on that one? I'm sorry, before I move on.
Okay.
Okay. So then for the schools that were identified for reduced fleet resources, we have to go in and develop new routes. So that's really what the team has been working on quite a lot over the last several weeks or month. Transportation department routing personnel started to develop and test these new routes with the reduced number of stops that were identified in step 1 and the reduced number of buses at those different schools. And you'll see those schools below, Blackhawk Corral, Knollwood North, Rapid Valley East, Southwest, Valley View, and East. So we're moving from current number of buses, and you see the total number of needed buses under this plan there on the right-hand side. That sounds like a really simple step. Hey, you just make a new route and test it. It's really complex, and it takes a lot of time because there's a lot of logistical information involved in trying to go in and shrink that route, look at the stops, make sure the stops are reasonably spaced, make sure that the overall route is not increasing in length to the point that we don't feel good about it. So that was a significant step to it. It sounds very simple here, but very, very difficult to do. So as with any change, of course, there's going to be positive benefits and there's going to be some drawbacks. On the positive side, based on current staffing levels, back to your question, President Carr, student transportation could cover all routes as we move into next year and have a driver reserve, or you've heard me refer to it as bench strength, of 2 to 4 drivers. So to your question, under the current conditions, at the current staffing levels, asterisk, yes, we could cover all routes and have 2 to 4 drivers in reserve. And we would deploy those drivers every single day. I mean, there's always sick, day off situations that are happening. So it would give us the ability to absorb that without another cancellation on that day, like what we're experiencing now. I think in addition to that, it's much more efficient. We're really efficientizing the student transportation function. Again, we're lining up with national averages. We're deploying our resources in a much more efficient way, which then injects resources back into the system that can be used elsewhere for other things, such as compensation increase, such as et cetera. So always a benefit anytime, in my opinion, we can drive efficiency. Of course, I would say that as your finance guy, but always drawbacks, right? There's going to be drawbacks in these situations. We talked about the idea, even moving into the study, that this wasn't going to magically turn around and that there was going to be hard decisions. And so a couple of the drawbacks I think that jump out in this plan, of course, the pickup areas are going to be less convenient. You'll have kids moving from maybe a half block to 3 blocks. That's difficult. again, there are legitimate concerns out there. I'm not making light of any of the concerns in regard to wanting a stop closer to one's home. I get that. However, there's a trade-off here, and again, we feel like we're presenting pickups, areas that are still safe, they're reasonably spaced, they're not inequitable when you look around the district, in that's a good trade-off. Secondly, the routes, because we are essentially pulling them further, will be slightly longer. On average, about 5 to 7 minutes. So we're not talking about 45 minutes to an hour, but again, they will be slightly longer, which changes things, I think, from a stakeholder perspective in terms of understanding what that looks like, how you arrange your personal situation with that. However, again, I think when you really step back and you think about the situation we've had over the last several years and the idea of canceling routes on a rotating basis for 2 weeks at a time, potentially 2 to 3 times throughout the year, that this is a very reasonable trade-off for trying to get to a better place. I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on compensation, even though we've talked a lot about logistics. Obviously, as you saw in the review of the study findings on the first slide, compensation is going to play a part as the overall pool of resources in terms of the folks who are entering driving gets smaller and smaller. It's more difficult to compete, and obviously compensation is a big component of that. So obviously we know it's a major aspect in recruiting and retaining folks. You all, in cooperation with administration, have done a great job of prioritizing driver compensation over the last 2 negotiation cycles. We increased the starting wage 17% in the fiscal year 24 negotiations and another 6% in the current year 25 negotiations. So that's been a huge deal, a 23% increase over the last 2 years. That's really significant. It's not perfect. It's not necessarily where we want it to be, but again, the idea is just to keep making significant progress. If we can do that every year, we'll eventually put ourselves in a place where we're competing much better for that shrinking pot of resources. And I think we're doing that already. We're $20.33 an hour, I believe, is the starting wage now. Last time I checked, we were well within 50 cents of several of the competing districts around. Closer in some, a little further away in others, but I think it puts us in a much better position to compete for those resources. So next steps. We do still have some work to do in refining those routes and ensuring that we have all the pieces in place and that we've stress tested the routes and that we can do what we say we're going to do when we make these changes. We'll continue to monitor the ridership registration. So we're going to make a bit of a change in terms of what this looks like. We want families to tell us if they are planning to ride. That doesn't lock them into anything. They're not going to get punished if their student doesn't ride or any of those things. But it's essential that we have a really good idea going into the school year of who is riding a specific route. And so we have not done that in the past. I think it's certainly a move that we need to make because it gives us a much better idea on how we can plan and how we can carry things out effectively. We are going to send a letter probably by midweek or end of this week that notifies families of these general changes. So really kind of a recap of what we just talked about. We'll bring in a lot of the elements of the study and talk families through those changes. And then within probably 2 weeks or so after that, as we start to lock that information in, we'll notify families specifically of what their new pickup and drop off locations will be. So I can't remember who asked the good question earlier, but in regard to families understanding, that is all going to be route specific information. So we can't really send a general letter. We'll send letters specifically to families whose students are on those routes of their changed routes, so they will know exactly where their route will be as we move into next year. So those are the next steps at this point. Again, I feel like this is a really good step towards solutions and really keeping in mind the minimum effective dose. We will see where things go from here. I hope that staffing levels hold steady or increase throughout the year, and we make it through the year with no problems. Obviously, none of us have the magic 8 ball to see if that's going to happen, but I think we put ourselves in a much better position as we move into next year to be able to do that, both with the increased compensation in this plan. And I think it's a really fair trade-off to our stakeholders from where we've been to where we're going. So with that, President Carr, I'll turn it back to the board for any questions or conversation.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Clapham.
So combination of a couple comments and questions. One, I already think I found you a new driver 2 days ago. I'm
Hey.
excited about.
Excellent, thank you.
Just moved here from another state, already
Oh, cool.
certified, so we're just
Hey, that's
improving
great.
even more.
That's awesome.
Also, I imagine, and just being a parent with two bus riding kids, that those updates would also be put in the Stop Finder app
Yes,
too. So when you go onto the app, it shows you exactly where your route is, and you
Yep.
can actually drop a geographic ping to tell you when the bus
Yeah.
passes this point, so you know when to send your kid out the door.
What app?
Stop Finder is what it's called. It's great. So yeah, every morning my phone bings and it says, okay, that means I know the bus is 2 minutes away.
Yeah.
So that's when I send them out the door. So,
Oh, that's
so that'll be another way, families, you'll be updated when when you open the app, it tells you
Yeah.
exactly where your stop is. So.
Yeah.
Good. Will this potentially help? I know there were some, and I don't know how actual widespread they were, but I know there were some struggles with like activities when we had teams or bands, whoever had to leave at a certain time. Is it potentially with a little bit of bench strength that can make some of those departures
Yeah.
have to be at like 5 a.m. because of
Yeah.
driver issues?
absolutely. I mean, anytime that we have that bench strength and we can deploy those folks to something other than a normal, regular route, it's going to help with those situations. So yeah, we ran into several of those situations throughout the year where it was just impossible to be able to have somebody on a route unless you started early, unless you went late, unless we modified it in some way or another. So this will certainly help with that as well.
And will also give us a little flexibility in the case of mechanical issues. If we're not driving 4 or 5 of those buses, then if something goes awry,
Yeah.
does that give us a little bit
Mhm.
more help there as well?
Certainly, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. The really thin line that we were treading in terms of potential issues that could arise was just really difficult, because when you have every single driver deployed and we're pulling every CDL licensed person, so mechanic, warehouse staff, I mean, we have nothing to fall back on when you have a bus breakdown to tow back in. And so you got to wait for a tow company and all these things. So anytime that we can free up those resources, and heck, if we have 1 or 2 folks sitting in the bus barn that are bored and we're going to pay them for being bored so that we can have them in the times that we need them, that's perfect. So that's really where we're trying to get back to is the idea of being overstaffed, at least in terms of routes planned. I don't mean overstaffed from a complete functional perspective, but overstaffed in terms of we have 26 routes and we have 29 drivers. Hey, perfect. We're in a great spot. So yes, it'll help with all those situations. And I one more comment. The route finder comment, or excuse me, stop finder comment is really great, and we're going to push that really hard as we have some of these conversations, because I don't think we've done enough and it's not utilized enough. And it's a really, really good app. It can do some really great things, like the geographic ping is a huge deal, because most of us are running around trying to get kids ready in the morning. And so not having to guess and know if they're 5 minutes behind or 5 minutes ahead or whatever, that's a big deal. So thank you for bringing that up.
Ms. Stephenson.
Well, my question is kind of going off of the Stop Finder. It feels like the system is kind of antiquated, and it is a system that technology could make better. The fact that we don't actually know our actual ridership. Have you looked into options? Like, can kids just have a little barcode that they scan so that at least we know?
Yeah.
And then you could use AI like mid-year to be like, actually, it looks like this route's a little bit light. Let's switch things
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
It just seems antiquated.
No, I think, again, I think that's a fair assessment and, this, I will say this, I think that in particular, one of the areas that we collectively, we school districts are behind in is adopting better, smarter routing technology. And we moved to a new company not long after I started. So we've been with it 6-ish years now. And it's been great, but that technology is improving so rapidly and at such a different pace. And now you have AI coming in that I would totally agree with you. I think we can do more with less in terms of how we use our technology. And so again, as we're moving into this next year and we're continuing to analyze the situation, I think it's something we need to think about. Those software movements are tough. Technology department just loves to talk about migrating softwares and doing things differently, but it's necessary and it's something that if we can be better, again, more efficient, utilize our resources better, we need to investigate that and ensure that we're doing what we can to do that. So completely agree. I think that's a great point, and it is something we'll look at as we move into next year.
All right, Mrs. Urban.
Just in response to Christine's comment, Douglas started that last year where they have every kid has something and they scan in every time they get on a bus, which I think there's a ton of benefits to that. And do we still have, is it Tyler Technologies or did they change their name?
No, we Tyler was the old company. It is now, okay, one of two things. Either Tyler is a new company and it was Versatrans.
I think
Tyler
they
is the
changed
old
their
company and
name
now
or
it's
something.
Versatrans.
Yeah.
They did something different.
But I just know if it's Tyler, they have those capabilities too, so.
Yeah. No, certainly you're right.
All right, thank you for that report. And I think while we're getting this great information, I just want to stress to the community while it may have seemed kind of slow in coming, this is the work that the board and the district is doing to answer. I know we had the listening sessions, the bus listening sessions last year, and this is a result of your comments and your concerns. And so it's just evidence that we are doing something. I know when you hear a lot of complaints and the board is not doing nothing, this is an example of what happens, that we are listening and we are trying to make change. It sometimes takes a little while, but here we are, and for the better.
For sure.
And so hopefully this next coming up year, those of you that are riding the bus will see the work that's been done. All right, any other board member? Seeing none, thank you for both of those reports.
Thank you, President Carr.
All right, this time, no conflict of interest. Item 9, I will entertain a motion to approve the Rapid City Area Schools Policy, Procedures, and Exhibits first reading.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor of accepting the Rapid City Area Schools Policy, Procedures, and Exhibits first reading, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. All right, motion carries. Item 10, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed agreements.
Can I pull one?
You sure can pull one.
May I please pull Bravo?
Bravo. Okay, any other board member would like to move any other agreement? Okay, any more discussion? All right, all in favor of accepting? Okay, we hadn't moved that yet. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed agreements, Alpha, Charlie, and Delta.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve proposed agreements, Alpha, Charlie, and Delta. Discussion? Seeing no discussion, All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agreement with MIYO Health teleteacher.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agreement with MIYO Health. Is that abbreviation or is that a name?
I think it's an abbreviation.
Okay, I don't want to be up here looking crazy. All right. Health teleteacher, discussion.
So I just had a question. I don't know if Mr. Sasku knows this, but we were just talking about, doing a campaign for HR and needing more. So my question was, it's like, as we approve this, I know we had some struggles with the telehealth speech therapy. It wasn't necessarily our staff's favorite, though we need the resources. So my question was, if we approve this and have great fortune and then hire 4 people and don't need it, like, how are we just paying for it regardless? Can we decrease our contract? Do we know our flexibility? Just curious.
I'm not sure the flexibility that we have within it. I would be ecstatic if that were the scenario, but
Here, my note.
yeah, Dr. Coleman?
I just got kicked off Zoom, but I can.
All right, did you finish with your
Yeah.
comments, Dr. Strasser? All right, Dr. Coleman, we'll hear your comments.
Just to put a little input into it, currently this year, we've had 5 teleteachers within our district to provide special ed services. Yes, I would agree, it is not the first choice of how we want to provide services for our students. One nice thing, next year, we will have 0 teleteachers or teletherapists for speech. We have been able to fill all of our speech therapy positions, so we will not need the teletherapy. Teleteachers, when we look, unfortunately, at the number of positions that we have open, the must-need positions, we're at like 16 positions that we need to fill to be where we are right now. And that does not include the 5. If we get those 5, then that'll decrease at least the number of bodies that we need. Unfortunately, I think regardless, we're going to need teleteachers, even if we do get a good response from our advertising campaign.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? All right, all in favor of approving the Mayo Health teleteacher signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Approval of the proposed consent agenda. Any board member would like to pull an item?
Can I pull Bravo, please? Again?
Okay, anything else? All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed agenda except for item B.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve proposed agenda, proposed consent agenda except for item B. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any noes, please say no. I will entertain a motion to approve bids, refuse hauling, for refuse hauling.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the bids for refuse hauling. Discussion.
Yes, honestly, my only discussion was I wanted to bring up, as we talk about, sometimes things feel slow, that the student school board was really adamant about really wanting to have recycling at their schools. And those students worked really hard and did a lot of homework and a lot of legwork to make this happen. And so I think multiple things. One, we got a student school board this year, and we're already seeing now how that student school board is being effective, getting things that they would like to see done as students. And so this is the fruit of the labor that takes several months to happen, but I think that's a great thing that we're voting on something that the students initiated and are bringing forward.
All right, awesome. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the bids for refuse hauling signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Motion carries. All right, we're on item 12. Items for board information, committee reports. Any committee reports, Mrs. Urban?
Okay, for facilities, at our last meeting, we got a summer projects update, and our facilities staff and buildings and grounds are incredibly busy. So I just want to touch on a few of the big projects that are happening this summer. The CHS library facelift is going on. They're also getting a bathroom facelift over at Central, new paint and different parts of the building, so a lot happening there. Blackhawk is getting air conditioning, excuse me, a few projects at Knollwood, sand mitigation and replacing the glass wall in the gym, stormwater mitigation at Meadowbrook, a secure entrance at Valley View and a new roof at East Valley View, low roof replacement at Wilson, changes to the NMS North Middle School Tech Room. West Middle School has some windows that are getting replaced, which gets us one step closer to being able to create a secure entrance and relocate those offices. Lots of work happening at Stevens, including a new ADA entrance paint as well. Buildings and grounds is getting a covered parking lot, which will protect our district vehicles. We now have fobbed medical cabinets to keep meds at all of our buildings. Right now, there's a key, and sometimes the key would get misplaced, and so obviously that's something that's a little bit scary, but this is a neat project because they told us we're the first that have ever done a fobbed medical cabinet, so exciting. And then finally, and we'll have more on this later, but we learned about a new housing development that is going to happen in the center of town over the next 10 years that might impact Rapid City Academy, potentially Wilson. And so it's right behind the academy, that big hill, and then on down. They're planning about 2,000 housing units there. Darren Haar and his partners have bought up that land over the last several years. And so they have some neat things planned, and we don't have a ton of details, but I think he's going to come in to a future facilities meeting and give us an update. And then my military advisory council meeting, they talked about this year that Douglas had a special honor cord for military connected kids to wear at graduation. They also had a special ceremony for military connected kids. Obviously, they have a large population of military families there, but I think there is a lot of interest in engaging the district in conversation next year about something similar for our district. And additionally, the group is working on a guidebook for military families who arrive in Rapid City. There's a ton of information. We're just going through it right now and kind of fine tuning all of it. There is good info about our schools. It's not super in depth, but it gives, basic contact info and an overview of our district. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Clapham?
I was just going to say that actually the, May was so busy that the outreach committee did not meet in May, but our plan is to meet pretty soon after this week and really record a lot of the feedback we got from this year, from the listening sections, make sure that that is communicated to administration in an organized manner, and then kind of plot out some things and ideas for next year based on the feedback we got from this year.
All right, awesome. All right, any other committee reports? All right, anybody has an other? Mrs. Clapham?
Just to say, of course, graduations were a really awesome thing to be a part of. It was wonderful for so many of us to be able to be there, as well as the honoring ceremony. I think, I mentioned it before with the track mates. It's just when you have a room full of hundreds of people who are supporting kids and the amazing energy that's in that space and all the energy and love and care that's gone into getting those kids where they are. It reminds you why we do what we do, why these kids are worth it. All the graduations were wonderful events. They all had their own personality, which I think is good. And I just wanted to say a big congratulations to, we had several track champions and Stevens softball. I got to be there to see them qualify for state last week. So they go into state this weekend in Sioux Falls, but congrats to those spring sports that continue even after graduation. So those students are still working hard even after they've gotten their diplomas.
All right, very good. Anybody else has an other? Yes, sir.
I just want to throw out the Stevens 4x1 girls set the meet record in the prelims last Thursday,
Oh,
and
wow.
just it was pretty fun to watch.
Wow. Where did they run?
Did you say where?
Yeah.
Sioux Falls, Howard
Sioux
Wood.
Falls, okay, all right, there, all right. Well, congratulations to all our students for their athletic efforts, all right. Any other? At this time, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session 1-25 2.1 and 2.3.
Motion.
It's been moved and seconded to go into executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. All right, thank you, everyone. Everyone that's watching, because there's actually nobody here. So, all right, we're now in executive session. We'll take a